The main character in the Tiger King documentary is Joe Exotic, who is a zookeeper for exotic animals, specifically big cats. Many of Joe's employees and his husbands throughout the years are interviewed during this documentary. Also, Joe's enemy and founder of Big Cat Rescue, Carol Baskin, is another main character in this documentary. Additionally, Doc Antle, who is another zookeeper, and Jeff Lowe, who takes over Joe's zoo, both have large roles. At the beginning of the documentary, we can tell that Joe is happy because his zoo is prospering and he seems to be successful while he is building his empire. On the other hand, Carol seems to also be happy. She seems eager to spread her message about protecting the rights of these big cats and has an army of people behind her that feel the same way. Joe Exotic wants to acquire money and fame throughout the film. He wants to do this mainly through his zoo, but he also tries to do it through things such as music, magic, his talk shows, and even by running for office. Carol Baskin wants to stop the cruel treatment of big cats by ending zoos such as Joe Exotic. However, this seems slightly hypocritical because she herself also used to breed cats and she now has a rescue zoo that is an attraction and has bad conditions for cats. Throughout this film, both Joe and Carol are deviant characters. However, for Joe, this behavior really escalates when Carol sues him for more money than he is worth. This sends him spiraling. At this point, Joe tries to save his zoo by any means necessary. He now does not have enough to support his cats, but he still tries to keep them all and make them live in awful conditions. He also starts to breed more cats to sell for money. Additionally, this is when he reaches out to Jeff Lowe and signs the zoo over to him so that Jeff can finance and save the zoo. There is a ginormous host of crimes that both Joe and Carol are at least suspected of. For both of them, it is very obvious that they are guilty of many different forms of animal abuse and neglect. Carol is suspected of potentially murdering her first husband. Also, Joe committed several crimes throughout the show such as arson, making death threats, and murder for hire. As Anne Helmenstein explains in her article, Animal Hoarding, The Psychology Behind the Cat Lady Stereotype, it is obvious that both Carol and Joe suffer from compulsive hoarding disorder. This is a disorder that is characterized by the fact that they own too many animals to the point where it is very unhealthy for both the animals and themselves, but they refuse to part from or give away any of their pets. Helmenstein explains that there are several neurochemistry and environmental factors that can cause hoarding, such as damage to the brain or an attachment disorder, such as poor parent-child relationship. This inability for Joe and Carol to separate from their pets can explain why they committed the crimes that they did. For instance, Carol potentially murdered her husband because if he left, then she would not have enough money to support her cats, and they would likely starve to death, due to Carol's unwillingness to let them go. Similarly, Joe hired people to murder Carol for the exact same reason, because her lawsuit did not leave Joe with enough money to support his cats. The potential victim of Carol Baskin's criminal deviance is her first husband, who she is believed by some to have murdered. Throughout the documentary, Joe Exotic victimizes several people. For starters, he continuously makes death threats and tried to hire multiple people to murder Carol. Also, he is believed to have been responsible for the arson and burnt alligators, along with all of Rick Kirkheim's films that he had been working on for years. However, the most obvious victims throughout this film are the animals, who are abused, neglected, and wrongfully euthanized at all of the different zoos that the documentary covers. The documentary does not dive very deeply into the character of Carol Baskin's first husband, and for this reason, I certainly believe that he did not deserve to have been murdered. Although Carol seems like a bad person at times, she did not seem to have deserved to be victimized by Joe's constant harassment and threats. Joe could have easily controlled himself by simply shutting his mouth. Although he felt threatened by her, he did not need to threaten her life by doing things such as shooting a fake doll that he pretended was her. It appears that Carol and her husband show many signs of post-traumatic stress. As they explained, they began to sleep with a gun next to their bed, and Carol stopped bike riding on that secluded trail because they felt scared for their lives. Also, Rick Kirkheim says that he broke down and lost it after his studio was burnt to the ground. After that, he drove away and never went back to Joe Exotic's zoo. From Helmenstein's article, it appears that all of this criminally deviant behavior is rooted from their compulsive animal hoarding disorder. They were willing to commit any crime to be able to keep their animals. Instead of turning to a life of crime, Helmenstein explains that Joe and Carol could have recognized that they had a problem and then seek therapy treatment for their issues. The therapy would have gotten to the root of their issues and helped them fix the hoarding by doing things such as setting attainable goals, one at a time, to stop the hoarding.